Yeah, recording. We have a group here of approximately 20 students who are 1 month before the end of the conclusion of their course. I think we're going to have students from our other classroom join us who are 3 months into their year-long journey. So that means there's people here at different stages of what they've learned about. But I'm confident that everybody has a lot to gain from hearing your story and your guidance. So with that, Menachem, I turn it over to you.
Sure. So, as I understand the format, I'm going to talk about myself, if you guys can last that long, for about 15 minutes, and then open up the floor to any questions that anyone may have, and I'll be happy to give whatever insight I am able to give. All right. So, I guess my story is a little bit on the more interesting side in terms of security. I got my start way back when security was just starting to be big. When I was first starting security, there was no real training online. There was nothing really available for people. In fact, the world of security wasn't really well known. It was back in 2011. I had just had experience with programming at the time. All I did up until then was development work. I use that term very loosely. I was like 20 at the time. I had no real professional experience. I hadn't done anything interesting, but all of my computer background was in programming. So I figured I get more enjoyment out of, really telling the computer what to do as opposed to, programming things. So I figured let me move into the security field and figure out how to hack things. So I did a little bit of Googling and I found the company, Offensive Security, that offered online training. The format of the format of the courses back then is pretty much the same that it is now, albeit a lot better with better training. But basically, they give you content to learn, and you go through it at your own pace, at your own time, with your own equipment, and then they give you a lab, and you basically make your way through the lab, hacking away. It really hasn't changed much in that sense. They still give you all the materials you need to learn. You go through it at your own pace, and you learn in the lab. The real difference is that the quality of the material has gotten much better. What's interesting to note is that the overarching attitude that they have has seen them become from this little niche company that I found online to being one of the biggest trainings of security offerings anywhere. They're a fantastic company. I cannot recommend them enough. I've gone through many of their trainings. So when I started, I knew literally nothing about hacking, zero. I had my mind utterly blown the first time I saw a reverse shell. I had no idea what anything to do with the buffer overflow was. It was an incredible experience for me, and I put in a tremendous amount of effort learning it. I was coming from zero, and there was a huge gap that I needed to make up. So I decided to make that gap up as much as possible with books and the very, very few blog posts that were available online at the time. I put in a tremendous amount of effort learning everything that was available. So I see a comment, wait for OSCE. So a little bit of a spoiler alert. I'm currently certified in OSWP, OSCP, OSCE, OSED, OSEP, OSWE, and OSCE3, and I'm enrolled in the OSMR course. So I have had a little bit more experience with security and a little bit more experience with offensive security in particular. So I feel confident recommending them to anyone who wants to go ahead and learn a little bit more about security. But moving on, when I had first started, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I took these courses, I read all the books, and by all the books, I mean literally every single book on security that was available at the time, all 10 of them. And I learned everything that I could. And I passed the OSCP, and it was great. I was still young at the time, so I figured I'm still in yeshiva. I was learning in Silver Spring, yeshiva Silver Spring at the time, and I decided I was going to go for the OSCE while I was, waiting to get married, waiting to get a job. So I took the OSCE. I passed that also. It was a very interesting course as well. But once I actually started learning, and I got married and I moved to Lakewood, it was a very interesting time in the security world, because at that point, security had literally just started making its way to the mainstream, and people just started understanding what penetration testing was. So there was a very big boom on hiring. So I was able to get a job fairly quickly. based on my qualifications alone. I had the 3 offensive security certifications. I got hired as a mid-level at a company. I worked there for about 2 years. It was a very nice company in that it gave me a little bit more experience in the field, but I didn't do much more than web application penetration tests, and they were not the most forgiving company in terms of giving more interesting engagements. So despite having, the knowledge that came from the courses, there's really no substitute for professional experience, and there's nothing like hands-on on the job learning in order to actually become good, in hacking and figuring out what it is you're doing. It's very hard to pivot from point to point if you don't have the experience behind you. And the only real way to get that experience is in the field hacking, and learning on the job. So it was a little bit of a catch-22, in order to get more jobs and get more interesting things, you needed to become better. In order to get better, you needed to become, handed more jobs. So there was really nothing for me to do. I ended up leaving that company after 2 years and joining a secondary company. So this company, the one that I'm at currently, Nettitude, I've worked there for about 6.5 or so years. Fantastic company, cannot recommend it enough. But they have a much broader view on security than most of the penetration testing companies that I've heard of. They are big believers in holistic security, in that you may have a very strong website and you're not going to get fine SQL injection, but it's a lot easier to get in. It's a lot easier to get into a company via social engineering. So if your weakest link is social engineering, why would a hacker bother hacking your website? I say this, today, the social engineering is the weakest link. I'm on a social engineering engagement currently. I've been on it for 3 days. I have 2 more days coming up next week. It was a single email sent to 91 people. Of those 91 people, 32 clicked on the link that I sent them. Of those 32 people, 21 people submitted credentials, which means that I had a 35% click rate, 65% click to conversion credential submission rate. And besides for being abysmal for the company, it was a pretty interesting thing. They were actually protected by two-factor authentication, so the social engineering itself wouldn't theoretically have been that effective. There's an interesting thing that when you have two-factor authentication, everyone believes that, that's it, the hackers are stopped. So I'm here to tell you firsthand experience, that is not the case, because in this engagement alone, I was testing out the credentials, and one of the persons that fell victim to the social engineering engagement had a push notification on their two-factor authentication. They let me through, which means I now had access to everything that the company had access to: the VPN, the SharePoint, email, Word docs, everything was online, of course. So at that point, it was pretty much all over for them. I was already in the company. That's more or less indicative of any sort of company that doesn't believe in holistic security. So one of the things that I like about the company that I'm at is that they're very top level view of what the engagement should be. They're much more into making sure that the client is secure, as opposed to the particular scope is secure. This particular company did allow me to train up in a variety of different engagements. Since I've joined them, I've become proficient in pretty much all the different offerings of security, and they've also helped me with training, with getting more offensive security certifications. Those are always fun. But in general, this idea that I believe is one of the most important things of security is this drive to always learn more and always push yourself to move further and become better, and not be satisfied with the level that you're at now, and always learn and grow and seek out the best company, the best engagements, the best, most challenging things in the field. I believe that that's genuinely core to what it means to becoming a good hacker. And I believe that as a result of me joining this company, I was able to push that further and become a much better hacker. In the end, starting from nothing, getting the offensive security certifications, and from there moving on to a professional career, I believe that the thing that helped me the most was my drive to learn, to always know more. And without that, I doubt I would have succeeded. I do believe that if you do have that drive, even if you know nothing, you'll be able to succeed as long as you push yourself. I mean, that's what happened to me. I came in knowing absolutely nothing about security. Within a year, I had the 3 offensive security certifications. Then I had a professional job, and then a couple years after that, I had the latest 3 offensive security certifications, all within a year of starting them. And it's all due to just always pushing. And if you're able to push yourself, and if you're able to always move further and not be satisfied with the level that you're at now, I believe that that's the best way to grow. And that's the best way, honestly, even purely talking about an employer standpoint, that's the best way to prove to an employer that you're someone worth hiring. If you show them that you're someone who's willing to grow and you're not satisfied with the level of knowledge that you are now, and you're always looking to push forward, that's one of the best attributes that you can have as a hacker. And that's, I believe, one of the greatest things that you can show to prove value to yourself and to the employer.
Very impressive, Menachem. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I understand you learned in Reb Lopiansky's yeshiva in Silver Spring. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I went to Reb Aaron's yeshiva.
Yes, I knew him really well from the mirror in Yerushalayim. So,
yeah, he's a chashuv man. I learned with him b'chavrusa for a couple months.
Oh, very nice. Yafta Mod. Okay, great. So the key is the desire to learn more and to actually always be learning more and gain more certifications. I know when we had talked, you had expressed an opinion about different certifications, what's worthwhile and what's not. Would you share that with the group, please?
So I like to caveat this with saying that my opinion only comes from the point of penetration testing. That I believe that what I say is valid and true for people who are going specifically into hands-on penetration testing fields, but not necessarily true for any of the other myriad fields in security. There are plenty of fields where different certifications have a lot more value, but particularly in the penetration testing field, the security certifications that are hands-on are the ones that are actually going to push you forward. If a certification comes as a result of a multiple choice test, examples being CREST registered tester, CREST certified tester, things like that. Those I do not believe, and employers also do not believe that they have the value that a hands-on certification would hold. Think like SANS, GPEN, GXPEN, GWAPT, OSCP, OSEP, things like that. Those are the hands-on certifications are really the way to go, because they show that put in front of an unknown situation, hands-on keyboard, you're able to hack your way out of a paper bag. And a multiple choice test doesn't necessarily prove that you can do anything besides for take a easy test.
I want to turn it over to the students to ask any questions that they might have. But I'll put one out there that I know they want to ask, and that is some indication of salary expectations in the US in this field.
A junior pen tester would start probably at around 80 to 90, depending on the company. Mid-level is going to be closer to the 100 range. Senior, you're looking at maybe 120, 115 to 130, let's say. Lead, you're looking from 130 to 150-ish. Principal, you're just going to be higher. I would say as well that the real benefits don't necessarily come from money. A lot of the times, companies will have ancillary benefits. For example, I'm a lead penetration tester right now, and I have never had an issue with my company once about working from home or Shabbos or Yom Tiv or anything, Cholamoid or Arabs, anything like that. If I tell them that, hey, I'm not showing up today, it's not even a question. It's just, okay. I'm not asking them, I inform them, and they understand that. When people started slowly coming back to work after COVID, it was, the conversation with my boss was, hey, are you going to come back into the office? And I responded, nope. And he said, okay. That was pretty much how it went. The ancillary benefits, I believe, far outweigh the monetary benefits, especially when it comes to a firm life, because once you put in the years and you get higher up, the effort that you put in shows, and companies are far more lenient with you, and they're able to give you the leeway that you need to, so maybe you'll want to work Rosh Hashanah because you don't, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and because you don't want to take those days off, but it's okay to step away for an hour or two and go to the mikvah. Whereas if you're not as senior or something, and or if you're not in a different type of company, then that may not be the case. So it's well worth keeping that in mind as opposed to the purely monetary benefits as well.
I see that someone asked if is your company, Jewish owned, which I understand it's not.
No, my company is not Jewish owned. Um, I work for a Gaish company. I believe honestly that the Gaim in the company are far more respectful of kashrus, of Shabbos, of Yom Tov, of everything like that than any of the Jewish companies that I interviewed at. I say that with a grain of salt. I've interviewed at 2 Jewish companies, so I have not interviewed at them all. So don't take that for a blanket endorsement of Gaim or a blanket, refutation of Jews. Just of the companies that I worked for, the Gaish companies are fantastic. They're extremely respectful of everything. And it really does also depend on boss and your relationship with the boss as well. So it's just something to keep in mind. My particular company both has an amazing boss, and my direct manager is amazing as well. And it's Gaish owned. So they're incredibly respectful of me. In terms of what to focus on in the beginning, when I came in, I had taught myself, with the help of some people, I had taught myself C, assembly, bash, VBS, and networking. And I found that all of those helped me tremendously when I made the transition. The overall landscape has changed a little bit, so take that with a grain of salt. For instance, I don't believe that it's as necessary to know C, but assembly is still extremely necessary. I do believe that knowing networking is even more important. The OSI model and all the different parts of it, knowing it like the back of your hand. Windows internals, things like that are extremely important. That's more or less what I would focus on in the beginning. I don't believe that learning hacking in the beginning is going to do you good. I believe knowing the fundamentals and then learning how to abuse the fundamentals is a more important cycle than just understanding the hacking portions of it. You do not need an expensive computer. I started off with I think 8 gig of RAM, 500 or terabyte hard drive, like nothing crazy. All you need is a processor that will handle. Now it's going to be more, obviously, because it's been 10 years since then. But all you need is a processor that can handle 1 or 2 VMs at a time, maybe 8 to 16 gig of RAM, some hard drive space. It's not really that big of a deal. I'm at the level where I mainly work on my own. I do not always work in a group. There are definitely more complicated engagements where I do work in a group, and a lot of the times I will have more junior consultants shadowing me to learn how to do either the type of engagement that we're on or how to test in general. So I do have a lot of shadows, which make it seem like a group, but ultimately I'm the one responsible. My name is going to be on the report. I'm going to be the one delivering the engagement. So all the work is from me. In terms of reverse engineering, I do know how to reverse engineer, partially because of the OSED certification that I have. The bulk of reverse engineering that penetration testers do is .NET and Java code reverse engineering, so it's not going to be super complicated. It's more like just reading source code and being adept at following trains of code and seeing input sinks and things like that. Understanding what is more valuable to the client is often more valuable than finding strange vulnerabilities. For an example, I had an engagement where I was testing alarm hardware, and there was a thick client attached to the alarm hardware. It was absolutely unimportant that I was able to edit the database and edit the files of the thick client because that didn't change the alarm. So the real issue was whether or not they could change the alarm through the thick client. That proved not to be possible. But in another engagement, the ability to edit the thick client files was indeed a critical, and I rated it as a critical. ASM does not necessarily depend on the path you take. It is always good knowledge. However, it may prove more useful in the different paths that you take versus others. However, the ability to understand low-level languages is always going to be extremely important. I don't believe that lacking a core part of what makes a computer run is going to be helpful for anyone. I do believe that knowing assembly, even at a basic level, is important. At what is the age range? Maybe 23, 24 to 40, 45. It's sort of all over the place. We don't really discriminate. I mean, my manager is 40, my boss is 38. I mean, I'm 31. It's all about that range. Did I find myself in a situation where I said, this is bad or this is different? I'll be honest, I don't really understand this question. Do you mean this is bad or this is different in terms of the engagement that was happening, in terms of the situation that I was in? Do you mind clarifying a little bit? The engagement that was happening? So I guess I can answer this in one of two ways. There were a couple of times where mistakes were made. For example, there were times where I had confirmed with the client that their lockout policy on their domain was 5, and I manually confirmed it as well with net accounts and stuff like that. And it turns out they had a security appliance that they forgot about that locked out accounts at 3. So when I ran a 3 password spraying attack with the approval of the client, it ended up blocking every single account out of the domain. That was like a really big deal. So that was not great, and I was not thrilled about that. So that would be one. It ended up working out because they timed the lockout out, which ordinarily we would say is a bad thing, but in this case worked out in our favor. I guess on the terms of the other side of this, where I've been put in engagements where it wasn't necessarily within my skill set, and it would theoretically be a this is bad type of scenario. What I would end up doing is just going to my manager and saying, hey, I'm not able to deliver this. This is out of my depth. I need some support. And he would give me, whatever support I need, either another consultant, additional time in the engagement, more resources, whatever it may be. That's more or less how that went down. I believe AI is, at this point, it's still snake oil in terms of defense products. In terms of other things, I have done machine learning engagements where we were able to, I guess the example for this would be, they had a machine learning thing where they wanted to train a data model based on pictures that were uploaded. So I showed them 2 different ways that we were able to break their core model, I guess. One of the ways was if I just uploaded 1,000 pictures of black PNGs, they would just be charged for the analysis of black PNGs. And if I did I'm blanking on the word, where you have a fade from like black to white with every single RGB color, it would have to process every one of those pixels, and it would end up costing them like an exorbitant amount. But that was just interesting in terms of their payment model. But it was also possible to upload black PNGs and just label them as cat. And then they were, you could poison their data lake, and then they'd be in real trouble. So they didn't really have any different, any protections of that in place. So that was an interesting engagement in terms of AI or machine learning. Gidra is a fantastic tool. It's not really used. A pen tester doesn't really need to get into that depth of reverse engineering. It's going to be mainly like JD GUI or JD Viewer or DN Spy or .peek, things like that. It's not going to be something crazy. My company is about 65 to 70 different pen testers, and it also does not, I'm not including in that the people who work in research and engineering, research and development, GRC stuff, SOC, incident response, ISC work, consulting, things like that. We cover pretty much every single type of security work possible. My department, the pen testing department, is, I believe, one of the biggest, but it's about 60 or 70 people, and it's a great place. Everyone there is extremely talented, and they're all very happy to share knowledge. I like it a lot. I'm currently a lead pen tester right now. That's where I am. So I lead a bunch of people. I'm involved a lot in training. I make sure that everyone is at least at the level that they should be, or they're being upskilled. For example, we have a lot of shadowing engagements where people who want to learn different types of disciplines. I was shadowed on my social engineering engagement by people who weren't that skilled in social engineering. They wanted to see how it went down. I'm going to be shadowed next week when I do an internal engagement, and they want to see how to test internal inf. I'm shadowed a lot in various different types of engagements. So that mainly has to do with me being a lead and making sure that everyone is trained well and is able to deliver at the level that they're at. As a result of me being where I am, I have a lot of general knowledge to impart to people. So it makes sense for them to shadow me because I deal with probably the widest or among the widest varieties of engagements in the company. I'm a more generalist than a specialist. Every day at work is not necessarily an exciting day. It doesn't get repetitive per se, but not every engagement is going to be, some crazy hack. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, you're not going to end up with a web shell on every web app, and you're not going to end up with domain admin on every internal. Some engagements, most engagements are fantastic, and they, you have a bunch of really cool vulnerabilities you can take, further and faster, and it's great. But some engagements are just boring. Some days you'll walk away at the end of a week of pen testing with missing security headers, and that's life. I mean, it happens. Some companies are just really, really good. Daily routine for me is I log on, I'll check my email, take a look at what engagement I'm doing or what engagement I'm in the middle of, follow up with client stuff. I'll start my testing day. While that's happening, I'll be fielding chats from coworkers who need help with things or just chatting in my internal chats, dealing with account managers that need help with things, finalizing reports, then finishing up. And if the client wants a follow-up email regarding the testing for the day, I'll send that email. But in general, it's just more relaxed about that. It is as flexible as you can make it while still delivering. There is no overseer over you with a whip. They don't track computer usage, and no one cares. The idea is that everyone there is a professional, and they expect you to be a professional. So no one is going to be checking up on you, but at the same time, you need to deliver what you're supposed to deliver. So as long as you deliver, then no one checks up on you, no one cares. And that's pretty much how it is. It's extremely flexible for me. How long to test a company security system is very dependent on the size of the company and the scope of the engagement. I've tested engagements that were, 30,000 computer nodes on the network. And that was me and a second consultant for 3 weeks each, which is a huge amount of testing time. And I've tested, 10 computer networks that were like 2 days of testing, and they're reporting it. It really gets highly dependent on the scope. There is no real liability on the tester as long as we do our job. There's a general understanding in the security world that testers are human, and sometimes we miss things. And even if we don't miss things, and there's a very large contingent of the non-security world that doesn't believe in applying patches or listening to advice. And as a result, people will, I had one client that effectively got the same report, 5 years in a row with every single vulnerability there. It was abysmal. And then they actually, this last year, I worked with them. And instead of doing a standard penetration test, we just sat and talked about what needed to be fixed, and they ended up being tremendously more strengthened as a result of it. So there is no real liability, but at the same time, there's also this understanding that we just do what we can. We make sure that we get our point across. What the client does with that information is on them. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. We do have an incident response team. We have several incredibly talented people on there. They follow up on engagements. They find things that are fantastic. It's a pretty cool place to be. I will say though, from my personal point of view, it's far more fun to be on the attacking side where we get to cause the problems than on the incident response side where they have to fix the problems and find them, because it's just stress that I don't want to deal with.
Menachem, you're a really young guy who's risen really fast. Where do you think you'll be in 5 or 10 years?
I don't see there's just one more question. Yeah, I mean, the general advice for security would really be just, use your head. Don't do stupid things. If you're downloading, kitten.jpeg.exe, don't do that. And is, Yaakov Shweki Mehera, that mp3.exe is also not the song you're looking for. Don't do stupid things. Don't click on bad links. And if you use your common sense, then you're 95% okay. And for the other 4%, you're going to have Windows Defender. And for the other 1%, yeah, there's nothing you can really do. So there is a level of risk that you're just going to have to accept. As opposed in 5 years, I don't see myself really liking to manage people. I like the more technical side of things a lot. I enjoy my day-to-day because I get to hack, and I really like hacking. So I see myself going on a more technical track and going more towards more different advanced engagements and stuff. They'd be wrong if they say in Linux it doesn't happen. In Linux, it happens just as much. There's an overwhelming majority of machines that I hack that are plenty in Linux. Linux is broken, Mac is broken, Windows is broken. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or just not understanding.
Menachem, did you create any hacking tool yourself? Joseph asked. Okay.
I have, but most of them are internal tools. I have several tools that are built for situational purposes. For an example, I have one tool that is meant for if you're on a box that has antivirus, PowerShell in constrained language mode, AMC, and App Locker in place, and you simply double click it and you'll get a fully antivirus bypassing PowerShell shell. I had to use that on several engagements. It's been incredibly helpful, but all my tools are generally like private, where I share them sometimes with the company that I work for, but they're all situational tools as opposed to like Metasploit general tooling. I don't like, for myself, creating these massive projects that then take a lot of upkeep and things like that. I just like creating like, okay, I have a problem, so let me quickly write something up, solve the problem, and then just move on. And then if need be, I will create a better version of that later, like I'll refactor it a little bit or add in some different bypasses and things. But the overall idea is that I will have a problem, solve the problem with a quick and dirty script, and then move on.
Menachem, when we spoke on the phone, you mentioned a company or two that could be possible employment pathways for our students or graduates in the U.S.
Yeah, so my company, Nettitude Group, has the accelerator program. It's open to all people and it's extremely competitive, but it happens to be a fantastic program. It's 6 months of training on salary and then a guaranteed job at the end of the training. You do need to prove aptitude and you do need to prove willingness to learn. I don't know of the other requirements. I'm not the hiring manager for that particular program, so I do not know the specifics. I do know that you need to solve a CTF as part of the application process and send in a write-up, so they will be judging you on writing. The program itself, if you do happen to get accepted, is a fantastic program. It's thorough, it's involved. There are other versions of that program that run in our company in the United Kingdom, like the UK, in Greece, in the EU, and I believe it's just there. You can apply there when you feel that you have requisite knowledge to solve all the good CTFs and demonstrate security aptitude. Full disclosure, a lot of the applicants have already proven themselves in some way by dint of having the OSCP certification or already being enrolled in the OSCP certification. We've had some outlier applicants. These are not the norm, absolutely not, but there are those who have OSCP and OSWE and OSEP as well. And those are like really valuable candidates, but they have no real experience, so they're still junior enough for the accelerator program. It doesn't mean you should be put off. Oftentimes those people don't necessarily get hired. But it is something to think about, that when you feel that you can prove yourself with the write-up, with the CTF, and on the interview, then it's a worthwhile time to apply. There are other companies that have juniors as well, like NCC Group will hire a junior. I have my own personal hangups with NCC Group, but it is a good place that will give you good experience if you do happen to get a job. Others, maybe Bishop Fox can hire a junior. There are a few of them, but they're all the same sort of competitive, because security it's unfortunately, in the past few years, it's become a little bit inundated. It's a little bit harder to break into unless you can prove yourself, which is why I would recommend certifications like, the OSCP, OSWE, things like that. Those are certifications that give the employer the confidence to say, okay, he knows a little bit at least of what to do when put in front of a keyboard. So that's worthwhile to make sure that you can sort of pass that first, HR filter, as it were, to get, face to face or whatever in an interview.
Thank you so much, Menachem, for sharing your expertise. We wish you much bracha v'atzlacha. Thank you so much.
Man, thank you. You too.
Good night.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.